Welcome back, Sethling here. And today I want to show you a speedrun that I did that is sort of the culmination of my last few videos. This is a speedrun of all 5 games on the Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World cartridge in 13 minutes and 27 seconds. So first you'll notice I'm deleting all of the save files, or making sure that all the save files are empty, and then launching Super Mario Bros. 3, and then immediately saving and quitting from Super Mario Bros. 3, and launching Super Mario World. And I'll explain why I had to do that in a minute, specifically save file 3, or save file C. But so this is sort of a new category. There is a leaderboard, there is a leaderboard for Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World, all 5 games. But that leaderboard doesn't allow things like arbitrary code execution or wrong warps, things like that. There used to be a leaderboard that did allow those things, but nobody submitted any runs to it. And so they just kind of removed it. So actually they have reinstituted that leaderboard. So now there is a leaderboard. This run is the only run on it. Hopefully other people will actually run it. But so this is a legitimate category. You play all five games, and Super Mario World is one of those games. And so using arbitrary code execution in Super Mario World is not really out of place. This is sort of like the true any percent of all 5 games on that cartridge. Before I go any further, though, I need to give a huge shout out to Mr. Cheese and Mally. So Mr. Cheese has done a ton of research for this route. Things from understanding how to launch other games, like basically run the code to load Super Mario Bros. 2 mid-level in the final level of the game, things like that, enabling debug mode. He also did a ton of work to compress the payload that will be injected into the Super Mario Bros. 3 save file. So a big part of this route is corrupting that SMB3 save file C and basically writing a bunch of code that will get executed from Super Mario Bros. 3, and you'll see that later. But we write about 90-ish bytes to that save file, but over half of those bytes are just the value 0. It's much easier and faster to write the value 0, and so there's only about 35 non-zero bytes that I have to write. And so Mr. Cheese did a ton of work to compress that payload down so that there were as few non-zero values as possible, and made it a lot faster and easier. When I actually have to enter those bytes and inject them into the SMB3 save file, I will be under time pressure. I have to do it before the level timer elapses in Yoshi's Island 2. And okay, here you can see me starting to do power-up incrementation. You've seen this in the last couple of videos. It's necessary to do arbitrary code execution in Super Mario World. So thank you to Mr. Cheese. Ton of really great optimizations here and just a ton of research that made this route possible. Also, thank you to Mally, who discovered the Super Mario Bros. 3 arbitrary code execution exploit, again, without which this run would not be possible. We need to be able to reset the console and then run arbitrary code, and there's not really an easy way to do that with Super Mario World. It takes a lot of setup to be able to run arbitrary code in Super Mario World, a few minutes at least of setup, whereas by corrupting the SMB3 save file, we're able to actually very quickly run arbitrary code that we can actually save, and so when we reset, we'll be able to run that arbitrary code over and over several times. So yeah, thanks to Mr. Cheese, thanks to Mally. Let me launch into an explanation of what's going on here. So this is, again, pretty familiar from the last couple of videos. I'm just setting up some memory. That red shell on the screen needs to despawn at a certain on-screen X coordinate. So I have a setup for that. Here, I'm actually going to be doing the first arbitrary code execution exploit. And of course, I do this by spitting out red shells at specific X coordinates. These are pixel perfect X coordinates. To set up some code in the sprite X coordinate table. This one is only 3 bytes. This code will change Mario's power-up state from power-up state 5, which is this sort of green and red Mario, to power-up state hexadecimal 15, which is, I don't know, green goblin Mario. I don't know what you want to call it. But power-up state 15, so yeah, that 1-up touching Mario is what triggered the arbitrary code execution. In power-up state 5, the only way to trigger that payload is to collect a 1-up. In power-up state 15, you can trigger it by collecting a mushroom. And you'll notice at the top of the screen, I've got that mushroom in the item reserve box. And so by collecting that mushroom, we can trigger the arbitrary code execution. And it also gives us back a mushroom. Kind of like when you collect a mushroom in your Fire Mario, you get the mushroom back. So here I'm setting up some code. And what this code is going to do is it's going to write 1 byte of data to the Super Mario Bros. 3 save file, and then increment the target address for where it'll write that data. So it'll write data to a certain spot in the save file, and then the next time it runs the arbitrary code execution by collecting that mushroom with Mario, it'll write the next byte, and then the next time we collect a mushroom, it'll write the next byte. So it writes 1 byte after another, and what value does it write to that spot in the save file? That value is determined by what buttons I'm holding down on the second controller. So on the top right of the screen, you can see I have some clamps on the second controller. Here you're going to see me adjust all that. And then you're going to start to see me hold down different sets of buttons on that second controller and pressing select on the main controller. And so basically each time I press select and collect that mushroom, depending on what buttons I have held down, it'll write a different byte to the SMB3 save file. So here I have basically a document open, and you can see that document if you look in the video description that says what sets of buttons I have to hold down on the second controller and then press select. So every time I touch that mushroom, just a different byte gets written to the SMB3 save file. Here you can see I have to write 29 bytes in a row of 0. So I'm not touching any buttons on the second controller. There are 2 buttons held down with a binder clip and a spring clamp respectively, but those don't count towards the bytes that get written. So I'm writing a bunch of zeros. So this is, like I said, Mr. Cheese did a lot of work to make as many of these values 0 as possible. You can make this go even faster by jumping to collect the mushroom. But I didn't want to mess with like jumping. There's some chance that if I did it wrong that I would crash the game. And so I just let the mushroom fall all the way down. So you could speed it up even more. And so that's the value of having a bunch of zeros in the payload, is it could go even faster than this. So this, yeah, we're corrupting the save file. This sort of ties into why I started a new game of Super Mario Bros. 3 on save file C, and then immediately save and quit. By starting a new game on that save file, I initialized that save file to have certain values. Basically, the game just automatically sort of sets an initial default state to that save file when you start a new game. And so all this data that I'm writing into the save file needs to end with a checksum. A checksum is basically, it's like a number that adds up all of the bytes in the save file and then stores that to the end of the save file. And so when the game boots up, it checks if the checksum is correct, if the sum of all the bytes in the save file add up to the checksum. And if it's not correct, it deletes the save file. And so that needs to have a very, very, very specific value based on the sum of those bytes. And so if I didn't know the initial state of the save file, I wouldn't be able to write the checksum correctly. And so that's why it was important to start save file C in Super Mario Bros. 3 and then immediately save and quit, just so we'd have a known state for that save file. So there I've written all of those 90 bytes I was talking about earlier to the SMB3 save file. Here I'm gonna just do a quick credits wart for Super Mario World. This is like not even fancy at this point. It's just a 4-byte payload that will write the credits game mode basically a value to the game mode that plays the credits. So this is very like similar to stuff I've done before. And so in a minute here, you'll see when I collect that mushroom, it'll run the payload and play credits, and then I will reset. And so at this point, the Super Mario Bros. 3 save file is corrupted, and it has that payload in it. So what does that payload in Super Mario Bros. 3 do? Well, it does a few things. Basically, we're going to use it to launch into other games and beat them very quickly. So depending on what buttons you have held down on both the main controller and the second controller, it'll pick which game to load, and it will load that game at a certain world number and level number. And so if I hold down on the second controller and then use the first item in Mario's item bar, which is a glitched item. This is what Mally discovered, this glitched item that runs arbitrary code from the rest of the item bar. It was very quick there. I launched in SMB3. Now I'm in Super Mario Brothers. Oh, there's a lot to explain. Anyway, so I was holding down the right buttons, and it launched Super Mario Brothers at World 8.4 with debug mode enabled. So debug mode was a feature that the developers left in the game when they published the game, but there's normally no way to trigger debug mode. Debug mode works really funny. Like, you keep your momentum when you... Okay, so you can toggle no clip. There's a lot to explain. You can toggle no clip by pressing select in debug mode. And that's when Mario has that invincibility, and when he's, sort of flying around the level, he's in no clip mode. You can also press A to give yourself a power-up, so that's why he's big, even though he didn't collect a mushroom. It goes really fast when we can just no clip through everything and go, and yeah. Almost beat Super Mario Brothers. So when I get to end of Super Mario Brothers, I will reset the console, and you'll see me launch Super Mario Brothers 3. Pay close attention because it happens really fast. So I'll launch Super Mario Brothers 3. I'll use the first item in Mario's item bar, and that will run the code again. So here's Super Mario Brothers 3, save file C, and very quick, use the item, open the item bar, use the item. Yeah, and we're back into the lost levels now. So by holding different buttons down on the two controllers, I told it to, instead of loading Super Mario Brothers 1 at World 8.4, it loads the Lost Levels. It loads the Lost Levels at D4. There's kind of two endings to the Lost Levels. There's 8.4 and D4 are the two kind of main endings. And D4 just happens to be faster to beat, so that's the one we choose. And man, this payload by Mr. Cheese is awesome. Just the fact that you can choose like different levels, and you can actually load like a lot of different levels by doing this, but there's a certain set of levels. I almost just accidentally killed Mario by dropping him beneath the level in a room that you should not be able to die in. Yeah, so Super Mario Brothers 1 and the Lost Levels are both relatively straightforward in that we just load the level and then use debug mode to beat them. But Super Mario Bros. 2 is a little bit different. So Super Mario Bros. 1 and the Lost Levels has bounds checking, which means you can't like load a level number that isn't part of the actual game. Super Mario Bros. 2 does not have any bounds checking. So instead of loading a level number that is normally actually accessible, you'll see here in a second, I load level 7.6, which there is no level 7.6. And it's a glitched level. Basically, I will intentionally go through a door and then die. It looks like level 7.2, and in fact, once I die, the game gets confused into just loading level 7.2 midway through. So I don't even have to play the first half of 7.2. Again, we have debug mode enabled. So this is pretty cool that we don't even have to play the first half of the last level because we found a way to... Mr. Cheese found a way to just skip the first half of it by loading a glitched level. So here I'm not able to kill this guy with a star. If I did, it would not let me go through his mouth and enter the final boss. This fight is actually, you can't hear it, but the Super Mario Brothers 3 music is loaded. And this fight... So basically the trigger for being able to go through that door is when the music stops. And because the Super Mario Bros. 3 sound engine is still loaded, that music never actually stops when you kill a wart. But because we're able to give ourselves a star, when the star music ends, it allows you to enter that door. So it almost doesn't work, but it just barely does because we give ourselves the star music. All right, and then I beat Super Mario Bros. 3. So again, this is something that I did in the Super Mario Bros. 3 speedrun that I posted a couple weeks ago. What we do here is instead of, warping to the final level and beating Bowser, basically there's a couple of memory addresses that if they have non-zero values, they'll do something. And so the first one says, if you're playing a level and this address is non-zero, immediately beat the level, clear the level. The second one says, if you would try and load the overworld map, instead play the credits. And so the combination of the two means when we enter 1-1, it immediately clears 1-1, and then instead of loading the overworld, it plays the credits. So that one's the fastest of them all. It's kind of, that kind of makes sense because we're able to run arbitrary code after all the game assets are loaded. You can't really jump into the credits of those other games because you have to call some code in the game ROM that loads those games, and then you kind of lose control of what code runs at that point. and that code also initializes memory and everything. So you don't really get to like easily run arbitrary code after those games are loaded. But since Super Mario Bros. 3 is already loaded, we can easily make it run the credits. So there's sort of 2 credits warps and 3 wrong warps. One of those warps being very wrong in Super Mario Bros. 2 to make this route work. And again, like, huge shout out to Mr. Cheese for all the research. I was the one who sort of routed Super Mario World to make this all, to actually inject all the data into the SMB3 save file. But Mr. Cheese did all the research outside of Super Mario World to make this work. And Mally, of course, to find that arbitrary code execution exploit. Again, this would not work without that, because when you reset the game, you'd have to do that whole arbitrary code execution setup again. It'd be much slower than 13 minutes and 27 seconds. So, like I said, there is actually a leaderboard for this now, and I've included a route document in the video description. So if you're interested in checking out what goes into making this speedrun happen, what makes it tick, and you maybe want to do it yourself, there are some resources there, and you can always message me on Discord if you're interested in speedrunning it. And if you're interested in speedrunning it, I assume you can find me on Discord. I assume you know how to do it. But yeah, this is such a cool run. This is, I would say, much more legitimate than my previous runs where I like start speedrunning Super Mario Bros. 2 and then just save and quit and load Super Mario World and then, jump to the end of Super Mario Bros. 2. And because you're playing Super Mario World in a Super Mario Bros. 2 speedrun, that's sort of, it's a little weird, right? Whereas this one, you're playing Super Mario World in a speedrun that includes Super Mario World as one of the games you're supposed to beat. So it makes a lot more sense. So I think this is a really cool speedrun. A lot of tech went into this and a lot of discoveries and research. And I love this sort of thing. And it's really cool to combine multiple games, to combine aces in multiple games. And I don't know. It's just like, when I think of how far the state of this like speed glitching, the state of the art has just evolved so much since all those years ago when I was just like struggling to make an arbitrary code execution work in Super Mario World based on Jeff W's route. And I don't know, I think it's really cool. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching.